Fallout New Vegas is the title considered to be the best entry to date by many fans. If Fallout 3 was able to introduce Fallout to a brand new generation of fans, it was New Vegas that introduced these same fans to the closest thing they could get to the old games without actually playing them. It's an interesting dynamic that has, unfortunately, spun many nerd fights. Let's discuss Fallout New Vegas. In 2003, a number of Black Isle and Interplay staff left the failing company to form a new one, Obsidian Entertainment. They chose the name Obsidian due to them feeling that the name was strong and was similar to Black Isle's name. Obsidian's first project was Knights of the Old Republic 2, which is truly a prestigious task to be given right out the gate. When Fallout 3 released in 2008, Bethesda naturally shifted their focus back onto Elder Scrolls. Originally, they approached Obsidian to develop a Star Trek game. However, as many of the original Fallout developers were in the company, they gave them the opportunity to make a new Fallout title, and more specifically, one for the West Coast. New Vegas, as well known at this point, takes many elements from the original Fallout 3, Van Buren. Most notably is Caesar Legion, but other elements too, like the Van Graffs. After all, many of these same employees were originally working on Van Buren. New Vegas was released October 19th, 2010.
The game was rigged from the start.
Let's talk about gameplay. New Vegas is to Fallout 3 what Fallout 2 is to Fallout 1. Using Gamebryo and many assets from Fallout 3, the development cycle was extremely short compared to the game's immediate predecessor, and has nearly identical gameplay, with some important quality of life improvements. And, like in my Fallout 2 video, I'd rather talk about important differences. Let's start with the build. Fallout New Vegas does something rather different from Fallout 3 with its character builds. It brings back traits from the original games. Perks you can choose in the beginning that have positive and negatives. Additionally, you gain a perk every 2 level rather than a perk every 1 level like in Fallout 3. In Classic Fallout, you gain a perk every 3 levels. Additionally, big guns and small guns were merged to simply guns. Speed checks are rather binary rather than having a dice roll mechanic, like in Fallout 3 and the classics. Although it still warns you when a check is happening, just like in Fallout 3. In addition, there's a lot less bland, more skill point perks that Fallout 3 featured rather heavily. Instead, opting to have more perks that can affect conversation or combat in very interesting ways. Speaking of combat, Fallout New Vegas opted to give super mutants and Deathclaws damage resistance, which the latter is especially important as it does make the Deathclaws a lot more dangerous. As far as improvements to gameplay standards go, the ability to aim down the sights is one thing. Better companion control is another. The ability to choose a faction would prove to be a very popular aspect of Fallout New Vegas, and was something that was later adopted into Fallout 4. Companion quests and their own perks was also something that was taken by Fallout 4. Most of the gameplay issues are issues that existed within Fallout 3. Unfortunately, level scaling is still a thing in New Vegas, which is something I dislike as a concept. Bat's gun jank is still jank, and the game crashes more than a drunk night on the road when trying to run on newer PCs, even with mods. I found it crashing less than Fallout 3, but not a whole lot less. Fallout New Vegas world, as stated, is meant to take after the world of Fallout 1 and 2. So much so that not only is the whole desert wasteland a return to form, but much of the original Fallout soundtrack is brought back to us. That said, New Vegas doesn't have the same kind of dread that 1 and 3 had. It felt closer to 2, but not nearly as sarcastic. It's interesting. I think I'd probably say it mixes the feelings of Fallout 2 and Fallout 3, as it does utilize a lot of skeletons and tortured corpses into the world, but it doesn't feel nearly as weary. Other NPCs certainly do feel dark though, particularly with the NCR and their hopeless war efforts. Some have resorted to using drugs to escape their mental anguish. Slavery is of course a big topic due to the Legion. And there's guys like the Fiends who are among the sickest of people. Yet, despite all of that, the wasteland doesn't feel defeated. Maybe that's due to civilization obviously existing and even thriving despite the challenges. Megaton and Rivet City don't carry the same kind of weight that the NCR does, but that's just a guess. Of course, much of the said thriving civilization is made up of smaller same voice syndrome that Fallout 3 had. At least we have newer old man voice.
Heard it was you brought the law back to Prim, youngster. Hats off to you.
And while some don't like him, I actually quite like Matthew Perry as Benny.
We're the definition of cool, baby. We know how to swing. Folks come to us to learn how to enjoy themselves. Of the three families, we're the only ones with the heart and savoir-faire to run the strip on our own.
It's also pretty great to hear Michael Dorn reprise his role as Marcus.
Me? I don't really have a problem with the NCR. Set their sights a little too high sometimes, but they try. Legion? That's another story.
Even if he doesn't sound nearly as gruff as he once did in Fallout 2. But I suppose he's calmed down and learned a lot from his time running Broken Hills, and applied that to Jacobstown. Speaking of which, discussing towns, cohesiveness is generally something that I look out for, and it's hard for a game to replicate. While Fallout 1 did it well, 2 and 3 really didn't, and New Vegas kinda does. Good Springs, Prim, and Novak certainly feel similar. Nipton probably did once upon a time. Freeside and New Vegas definitely feel different, but intentionally so, especially New Vegas. Jacobstown feels pretty off, but to be fair, is a super mutant lodge area surrounded by snow. I've already mentioned New Vegas using the classical ambient music of Ye Olde Fallout, which is something I wholeheartedly support and would love to see Fallout 5 use. But I have to mention the radio system. New Vegas continues to tread of playing good music. Thankfully, New Vegas chose a whole new set of music to drill into our heads, like Big Iron or Johnny Guitar, rather than focusing on Fallout 3's going to be soon tired track. You remember what I said about Fallout 2's secondary main story? Well, assuming you watched my Fallout 2 video. But if you didn't, here's a clip. Actually, I find the secondary main quest to be a lot more interesting. It's a collection of side quests that tell a bigger story that spans multiple maps. The NCR versus Vault City versus Nerino storyline, and all of them making a grab for Redding and its gold supplies. I don't know, I like it. A story that you actually have to be paying attention to enjoy. A real power struggle between different nations. It's a bit better than the main story of the game. In a lot of respects, that's the story of Fallout New Vegas, but with some elements flipped around. NCR naturally returns as itself, but Vault City, a slave-owning state, is replaced by Legion, a slave-owning war state. And Nerino, a gambling crime family-owned state, is replaced by New Vegas, a gambling casino family-managed state owned by a powerful overlord.
Imagine New Vegas if there was no Mr. House-type fella keeping the peace. Then give everybody a gun and a jet addiction. Town's run by a bunch of crime families. No law to speak of. Make trouble and you wind up buried in Golgotha outside town. The scuzz factor's off the charts. Non-stop whoring and drugs. Couldn't walk down the street without getting asked to star in a porn movie.
At Redding, a gold mining city, is replaced by Hoover Dam, a massive dam used to generate power. And rather than just political savviness, it's outright war. NCR versus Legion versus House. Though I would say I'm rather disappointed with the lack of content for the Legion. I feel there was a real failure to make the Legion itself less black and white than was intended. It's really tiring to have 3/4 of the endings of New Vegas feel so samey. Still, I think it's a pretty good story overall. I enjoy some of the personalities introduced to us through it, like Mr. House and Fantastic, two very different, scientists.
It was easy, man. They were going door to door asking if anyone knew any scientists. I said look no further. They asked me if I knew anything about power plants. I said as much as anyone I had ever met. They asked me how well I understood theoretical physics. I said I had a theoretical degree in physics. They said welcome aboard.
But I really feel like this game should have been baked a little longer. If Fallout 3 was a title that brought the franchise back from the brink of extinction and cemented it as a new flagship title, it was New Vegas that reinforced its position by giving it validation by the old Fallout, the old wasteland, the old stories, the old creators. I'd say that New Vegas does prove that you can have the West Coast exist with classic style of storytelling in a 3D style of game. New Vegas proved to be a lot of people's favorite Fallouts, and there is a good reason for that. What is a shame that New Vegas has spawned a lot of heated debates. RPG mechanics versus shooting, good lore versus bad lore, and an odd amount of people viciously debating fake politics about fake factions. Nevertheless, I will say that New Vegas has turned out to be a very successful game with a lasting impression on the franchise, and it could not do so without the success of the older brothers. Is Fallout New Vegas worth it? Just like in my Fallout 2 video, I'll play GTO of Fallout's past. Personally, I'm surprised if you haven't played it yet. If you can get it on a stable device, or like messing with mods long enough to get this done, then sure, it is. It was, for better or worse, the revolutionary title that changed things up.
Seems like wherever I go, it's always the same. Folks just never leave each other alone.